Welcome to My View On, a series of podcasts where experts in the industry give their personal view on some of the big topics making waves in the media. All of the views are the experts' own, providing a fresh look at key issues facing the financial industry. Now, Britain's vote to leave the European Union is set to have a profound effect on the UK economy, and nowhere will this be felt more than in the pensions industry. With me to discuss this is Paul Speight, Head of Strategic Accounts at James Hay. Paul, welcome. Now, where do we start with this? The world pretty much appears to be upside down.
Well, following the referendum, we've seen two major events. Of course, first of all, we voted out, famously Brexit. But of course, we've also had a change of government. And, with that comes a possibility of further changes to our long-term savings market.
OK, so two fundamental features there. Let's take the first one you mentioned, Brexit. What's the impact going to be felt?
Well, we've got a couple of issues that I think the pensions industry is mindful of. The first one is certainly around what happens in the gilt market. So, we've got the potential of QE coming back on the table. Of course, this is all being driven by our fear that Brexit will have an adverse impact on our economy. Now, if you start having QE, and we've seen the gilt yield start to come down to reduce the amount of money that people get as their income, this has an impact in several sectors. First, we've got an impact on the annuity marketplace, but also in the defined benefit pensions marketplace. So we've seen some high-profile schemes get into difficulty prior to Brexit, the likes of BHS, British Steel, and so on. Obviously, if the gilt market moves as it's looking to move, then the liabilities, the amount those pension schemes have to cover off, increases, which puts further strain on employers.
And of course, it's not just Brexit, as you say. As a result of that vote, there's now a change in government.
Well, that's right. So, of course, George Osborne is no longer in the Treasury. What we do have is a new Chancellor. We have potential for new policymakers. And we've just seen, of course, that Baroness Altman has left the government. So lots of people who were driving policy are no longer there. What remains to be seen, of course, is what that now looks like going forward. Michael Johnson, who was one of the key advisors to the government, and famously, his ISA-centric savings was a big influencer on George Osborne. Will be interesting to see what influence he continues to have inside the organisation. I mean, he famously, just back in June, sort of told the world that the reason there was this big U-turn on tax relief was because they were fearful that changing those reliefs would have an adverse effect on people voting to stay in. Well, of course, we voted to go out. Is that tax relief question back on the table?
So the vote's been had, and there's a new government that will need to deal with all aspects relating to that. What do you think could happen? Well,
we so-called had this statement that it's the end to austerity, but the problems that the government faced with its finances haven't gone away. I referenced, the cost of pensions tax relief, which of course was before the last budget in March. There was, this low-hanging fruit. The figures of £50 billion were, being traded around as the cost of pensions tax relief. Well, if I say to you that the figures for, the public sector pension liabilities from the unfunded schemes alone run to some £1.2 trillion, you get a sense of some of the issues that are facing the government. I think one of the issues that we could see happen is, if the architect of this ISA-centric savings no longer has the influence, perhaps we have a move back towards a pension-centric savings. We don't know. We're interested to see how that plays out. But just acknowledging what's gone on in the ISA marketplace, from April next year, we will have 7 different types of ISA.
And of course, ISAs were originally intended to be a simple saving product.
Well, that's right. I mean, the joy and reason people engaged with their ISAs is because they understood them and they were straightforward. If we are now going to have 7 versions of the ISA, you're probably going to need to get advice as to which one is the most suitable for you. So if we're going to the situation where, we've got complicated ISAs, well, maybe pensions don't look so difficult after all.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed.